Right, greetings again. So, as I was explaining, the tragedy of the Islamic world is that there is this split between the Shias and Sunnis. And it's cost literally millions of lives over the last 1400 years or so since Muhammad died. I mean, I'm looking at this as a philosopher, as I say, Hegelian, surrendered to the same absolute that Muhammad thought he'd surrendered to. You know, he's on the team, as Thomas Carlyle said. We love Muhammad, but we also recognise his shortcomings, and we're trying to help. You know, if Muhammad was alive today, I'm sure that he would be utterly appalled at what's going on in Saudi Arabia, at the murder of this man, this poor, you know, Muslim intellectual. So far as I know, he'd never done any harm. He wanted the best for Islam, he wanted the best for his country of Saudi Arabia, and now he's been found chopped in pieces. You know, if Muhammad was alive, he'd be utterly appalled, and he would be probably blaming himself, like, how on earth did I let these people do this stuff in my name? The people that were chopping this guy up were thinking, I'm a good Muslim, you know, sawing away, cutting the bones up. I'm a good Muslim. No, you're not. Muhammad would be utterly appalled and disown you. And I've read the Quran, I've done a commentary on the Quran. You know, I know the Quran so deeply that I know this is completely against everything that Islam stands for. You don't do this kind of torture and cruelty. Of course, Stalin's lot did the same in the Lubyanka. They would torture and kill people, and that was done in the name of Marx and communism, which was antithetical to everything that communism actually stood for. So it's nothing new. The Jesuits used to torture people in their torture chambers in the name of Christ and Christianity. So as intellectuals, we're used to people taking ideas, corrupting them, polluting them, and then turning them around into the complete opposite. It's what Hegel would call the perverse dialectic of history. You know, things turn into their opposites. But we have to be vigilant to prevent this. And so let's therefore do a bit of piecework. Let's go back, trace the origins of the Shia-Sunni split, and heal it retrospectively. It's not too late, and it's now more urgent than ever. And what's going on in Yemen, the cruelties there, are happening because of this split. Now, I've traced it back. I've done my research. I've studied Islamic history and philosophy for years, probably lifetimes, to be honest. And I can assure you, as God is my witness, that there need be no quarrel between Shias and Sunnis. This whole split between Aisha's lot and Ali's lot can be resolved if you understand historically where it came from. And you have to think historically to solve this. That's why I did a PhD in history. History is the science of truth-making when it comes to philosophical and religious truth claims. Unless you're historically literate, you're in the dark. I'm sorry. So if you study, what I've done in my commentary on the Quran for the first ever time is do a chronologically accurate commentary on the Quran. The Quran as published is not in its chronological sequence. It's organised by length of surah, which is as if you took the Bible and you jumbled all the paragraphs around and put the longest ones first and then worked all the way down to the smallest. It wouldn't make sense. You know, the letters of Paul would be jumbled up with you know, the Gospel of John and Book of Lamentations and, you know, parts of Genesis. I mean, you can't order a sacred scripture by length of verse. I mean, it's completely bonkers. But that's the Quran we've all been reading. So what I've done for the first time in history as a historian is say, hang on, something's a bit odd here. Let's put it in chronological sequence. And I've done a commentary on each of the surahs in chronological order, as much as can be reconstructed by scholars. I've relied on others to provide that chronological sequencing, and I trust there is a consensus about that, more or less. There's one or two sections that are not clear. There's a few verses that have got interpolated that may belong in other sequences and so on. I've explained all that when I've done the commentary. But what emerges from that is a very, very righteous and extraordinary man. Muhammad is an amazing, inspired prophet. We would say in the Celtic world he was a druid, he was an arch-druid. He was someone who could receive the divine arwen, as we say, divine inspiration, and then transmit it in a way that his people needed, which is what an authentic druid does, or a prophet. Druid and prophet are the same thing. In fact, to be a prophet is part of the druid function, the ovate grade, as we call it. But I think Muhammad was grossly misunderstood in his time, and he would be turning in his grave to think that his own son-in-law, who he loved more than probably any man alive, Ali, and his descendants are now fighting to the death against his most beloved wife, Aisha, who he loved more than any woman in the world, apart from his daughter. And, you know, he's weeping in heaven, I would say, at this. So what I would like to suggest, and I've proposed this formally on behalf of my Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, right, is that what the world needs to set up, particularly the Islamic world, that's all the great Islamic scholars, theologians, some of whom I've met. I've had the honour to sit at the feet of some of the greatest Sufis alive at the time, some of the greatest Sunni theologians, but also Shia theologians. I've met people on all sides here. And I've met philosophers. I used to teach, as I say, at the Muslim College, which is the part of London, hopes to be affiliated to the University of London eventually, where they train imams and so on. That we set up a commission of reconciliation and peacemaking between Shias and Sunnis, and invite the leading Sunni scholars, the leading Shia theologians, to come together, historians, philosophers and theologians, and linguists and you know, critical scholars, to work out a peace treaty between these two warring branches. As I say, there's absolutely no justification for this to go on. And I've also said that it should be a peace commission for the Sunnis, the Shias, but also the Sufis. Now the Sufis are the mystical intellectuals of Islam. There are Sufis who start as Sunnis, there are Sufis who started as Shias. To be a Sufi is to rise above the battlefield. It's to become an ascended master, a servant of the Absolute. It's to be surrendered to the Absolute. It's to be an authentic Muslim, actually. It's thought the word Sufi comes from either the Suf, which was the white woolen robe they used to wear, or Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. I think it probably came in from the Greek, Sophia. It's to be a philosopher, Sufi. And if you read the great Sufi scholars of our era, people like Idris Shah and you know, others who brought Sufism to the West, Pir Vilayat Khan, and you know, I've had the honour of meeting people who worked with these people over the years, and they've inspired me to believe that they also have a very important part of the key of peacemaking in Islam. They're the authentic Muslims, these Sufis. They're completely non-violent. You know, an authentic Muslim never fights. One of the greatest sages of Islam is Jafar as-Sadiq, who was the sixth Imam. He's honoured by both Shias and Sunnis and Sufis. That's an authentic Muslim. Now, he never fought a battle in his life. He never killed anyone. He was simply a scholar like me, simply a teacher. What I want is people like him to sit on this commission, the Sufi, Shia and Sunni Peace Commission. I want it to be properly funded by the rulers of the Islamic world, the Middle East. You know, I want each country to bring forward its leading scholars. And we have to stop, intellectually, any excuse for this conflict that's going on in Yemen. And no, I don't know, you know, I mean, we're not going to stop the complete psychopaths, the bone cutters that think that, you know, their version of Islam is to chop up bodies. But we can at least take away any legitimacy from them. If the king of Saudi Arabia, the ruler of Turkey, the ruler of Pakistan, the ruler of Iran, the ruler of Palestine when it becomes an independent state, which I hope will be soon, you know, as a peace-loving state in alliance with perpetual peace with Israel, making peace there. There are many Muslims in Israel. I've met one of the greatest Sufi sheikhs in Israel, who is a dear friend of mine, who you know, we shouldn't forget the people of Israel are also some of them Muslim, and they're highly intellectual people, unbelievably intelligent. These are authentic Muslims who want nothing more than peace, and they want Jerusalem's Dome of the Rock to be a place of peace, which is what I want. Where Sufis, Shias and Sunnis can come from all over the world, it's the second holiest shrine after Mecca for Muslims, or perhaps after Medina. And so that's the vision. If we can get a Shia-Sunni Sufi reconciliation commission going, I think it would be something that we should do in memory of this poor man being killed. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East, which my institute founded back in 2008. I went to Israel and Palestine. I interviewed, that's when I met the Sufi Sheikh and other Muslims, scholars and people in Haifa and all over. that region and in Palestine. And I'd known many Palestinian intellectuals in London as well, where I worked for peace, obviously starting at the University of London. And this gave me the idea, why don't we set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East? Like South Africa's got one. It helped heal their conflicts. It stopped a brutal civil war breaking out. Can't we have one for the Middle East? So with a certain naivety, with hindsight, I said, okay, let's set it up, you know. I mean, the Institute of Peace Studies is supposed to be the premier institute for peace thinking in the whole of, not just Britain, but the whole of the 53 nations of the Commonwealth. We operate on a shoestring, you know, but that's our mission. So if it's not our job to create a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East, whose is it? Britain had the mandate for Palestine and left chaos in its wake. When at the end of World War II our armies were exhausted and we just pulled out, we left, you know, a shattered, broken situation. Israelis who'd fled from the Holocaust and escaped there. I've met people whose parents literally escaped overland from the ruins of Europe. And then Palestinians who were like shattered and didn't know what was going on, and some of them were led astray into anti-Semitic propaganda by the Grand Mufti, so-called, of Jerusalem, who was a pretty nasty piece of work. He was a very close friend of Hitler. He'd gone to Nazi Germany. He approved of the Holocaust. He said, yes, Hitler, kill all these Jews. And if you don't, you know, I will. Very nasty man. And led many Palestinians astray into thinking that militarism was the solution to the rebirth of Israel. It's not. Only peace is the solution to peace. You know, if Palestinians adopted absolute non-violence from the beginning, which is the Sufi path, when Israel turned up on its doorsteps and said, hey, we've just survived the Holocaust, we want a nation, a Sufi would have said, okay, I get you. Have some mint tea, you can have your nation, but please, can we keep our nation too? You know, they would have had a proper peace dialogue. That's what Martin Buber and the true philosophical Jews wanted. And Einstein, that's why Einstein refused to be president of Israel, because he was a proper, you know, wisdom seeker. He wanted world peace, like Moses Hess, who was the first great Zionist thinker. If you read the article by Sir Isaiah Berlin, you know, he points out Moses Hess was a dreamer, a visionary, a peace person, who actually first introduced Marx and Engels to each other. He was the authentic communist behind communism, but he was a man of deep spirituality and a pious Jew. So we have to bring peace. My mission with the TRC for the Middle East is to bring peace not just between the different sections of the Muslim world, but we have to bring peace between all of that and the Jewish world, which is itself broken. It has its extremists, it has its, you know, kind of nationalists, neo-nationalist Zionists that think every Muslim is a bad Muslim, you know, that don't have the subtlety of mind to differentiate between, you know, who is a good person, who's an ally. You see, as a philosopher, the point I'd make is that in the science of ethics, we learn that it doesn't matter what your outer religion, you could be Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, pagan, whatever. It's your inner ethical core, your soul that matters, right? And your deeds for virtue or vice. And we need to bring the good people of the Middle East together from every faith, every path, every town, every village has them, into a network of light workers, if you want, but actually truth tellers. I've also pushed this idea of a parliamentary veracity bill. So I think all parliamentarians in every Middle Eastern country and all officials like monarchs and so on should have to tell the truth. How are we going to get to know who actually killed this man, Khashoggi, unless people tell the truth? I'm hoping that in Britain and Europe and other Commonwealth countries, Canada, India and so on, we will get, in my lifetime, a bill in each parliament making its parliamentarians legally obliged to tell the truth. Because, you know, we're not going to get peace on this planet till that happens. Zoroastrianism, which has influenced Shia traditions in Islam, Zoroaster was a very noble and ancient prophet. He said that the only way we're going to get peace on this planet is when truth starts coming back out. And that the devil, Angramenu, which he kind of anthropomorphized as a devil figure, is actually fueled by lies. Druj is the figure that creates the demonic in history. And we're seeing that. And I want to just in the last closing bit join up a few more dots, right? So That's what I'm talking about, the Middle East. But this also has impacts in Europe. Okay, because Britain's policy, and I'm speaking as someone that studied British foreign policy and American for a long time, I'm Canadian British dual citizen, has been very much to be in bed with Saudi Arabia and to attack Russia at every opportunity. This alliance goes back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, when the British intelligence foreign policy analysts and the Americans decided, well, we don't like Russia, they're nasty communists, so what we'll do is we'll ally with these Muslims and will then clobber and attack Russia. And they armed the Mujahideen, out of which came Al-Qaeda and other extremists. And it was all funded by Saudi money. And deals were made at that time that were, huge amounts of money were passing back and forth. Now, I think that there's a danger, and I'm speaking as a critical student of the history of foreign policy, there's a danger in the kind of thinking that goes, well, we hate X really a lot, so we're going to ally with Y to destroy X, but we're not going to inquire too much into Y's ethics. I mean, we hate X because they're unethical and evil. We're going to ally with Y, and yes, rumours of them being unethical too, well, we'll ignore that, because we're going to make a geostrategic decision to kind of go with them against them. You see, that whole way of thinking is very is flawed ethically. You don't find truth by doubling the lie. As a philosopher, I can either find truth or I can just aggregate more lies together. If I go the lie route and I go with these people because they only tell half lies, or their lies aren't quite so bad as those lies, I end up with the Sorcerer's Apprentice. I end up with buckets everywhere and floods, and I can't stop the bad magic that I've created. So what we should do, what we should have done then, what we should do now is say, look, we're neutral. If I could unroll the cameras of history, I'd go right back to the Afghan invasion by the Soviet Union. I'd say, we're neutral on this, but we'll mediate. We don't support either the extremist Muslim rebels, we don't support the extremist Soviet invaders. We want you to live in peace. And I would say that would be the voice of the authentic Afghan people. The Afghans didn't want their country to become the most fought-over, mined part of the world. The Afghan people are sick of landmines, which they keep stepping on and blowing up. They're sick of extremism. I have many dear friends who are Afghans. They want